Because bitches get riches. Bitches get riches. Bitches get riches. Bitches get riches. And so can you. I'm Piggy.
I'm Kitty.
And we're the bitches in Bitches Get Riches.
We are your kindly internet grandmas cursed with firm young bodies.
And we're here to feed you cookies and reassure you that it's all going to be okay.
Our time on this planet is limited.
So let's get started.
Today's letter comes to us from Patreon donor Julia. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Julia, you glorious and radiant land mermaid.
Julia writes, I'm 21 years old and I was in college majoring in biology, but I was just miserable and had to leave. But all I ever wanted to do was science, and now I'm really struggling with what to do next. I was paying off classes as I went, as much as I could anyway, so I only have one loan to pay off, but I really just don't know what I want to do with my life. I've worked in retail and food service and I hated it. I've been applying to daycare centers because I like kids, but I haven't heard back from any of them. Any advice you could give me on finding a direction would be very much appreciated.
This is one of those very weighty questions that makes me feel like I'm holding someone's life and future in the palm of my hands. So just a disclaimer, we are not professionals and we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah, worse than not being professionals, we're just random creeper weirdos who live on the internet and want to tell you our internet opinions, which are worth less than nothing because...
do not trust us ever.
Yeah.
Great. So credibility established.
I actually sent her a follow-up because I was curious if when she said that she was miserable and had to leave, was that the biology part or was it the college part? She said a little bit of both, but mostly it was that the coursework was much more difficult in terms of the amount of time that everything took, the number of hours that she had to be in classes, followed by then coming home, reading, studying, doing homework, writing papers. It was just... she felt like she was spending so many hours just to maintain C's. And that is a really frustrating situation. I'll be honest, as I have aged.
And you have aged quite a bit since we've met.
Beautifully. I'm the finest wine to your $2 check, which is now $3 check. Inflation, man.
That's preposterous.
It's really bad. Okay. So as I have gotten higher and higher and higher in terms of my career ladder, I have worked less and less and less and less. And I think anyone who tells you otherwise either has a ton of integrity and they really pour their heart into what they do, or they're lying. In general, I think the lowest paid jobs tend to be some of the hardest jobs.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the jobs that pay really, really, really well, you can fuck absolutely everything up and they will send you out on your way with a golden parachute as thanks. So you can buy your fourth villa for your daughter's horse groom. So the level of work I was expected to do in college was, in retrospect, the most work I've ever been asked to do and the hardest I've ever been asked to work. If I could describe professors as like bosses, the hardest and most unforgiving bosses, a lot of them that I have ever had. So I do want to acknowledge that college is really, really difficult for a lot of people. That is a valid way to feel, that you're being worked really, really hard. And I don't think that most jobs ask you to work as hard as they do in college. That hasn't been my experience. What's your experience, Piggy?
It's fairly similar. I do want to say that I work in an industry that has a culture of martyrdom. Publishing is one of those vastly competitive industries that's also vastly underpaid. Everyone wants to do it because working with books is fun, but once you get in it, like, you work your ass off to rise by the like little inches rather than like actual steps up a ladder. So I do think publishing is a little bit of an outlier, but as far as like my personal experience goes, I think when I was an assistant editor, which is kind of the second step above the ladder and 2 steps down from where I am now, that was definitely my hardest working period because I was supposed to know what I was doing by that point. I wasn't, an editorial assistant anymore. And by the way, like, my husband always makes fun of me because he says every job title in publishing has some form of the word editor. So editorial assistant, assistant editor, associate editor, acquisitions editor, managing editor, production editor, developmental editor. Like, it's all like, he says we all have the same job. We don't. Anyway, I definitely earlier in my career worked a lot harder than I do now. And if by some horrible, tragic chance my boss ends up listening to this, I want to say that it's because I understand what I'm doing more, and I've been freed up to do more of the strategic thinking and brainstorming and sort of idea work that I didn't get to do when I was lower down on the totem pole because I was working so hard at that grunt work. So I definitely agree that, for Julia, there's probably a light at the end of the tunnel where going to school for biology is a lot harder than maybe the life of a biologist or, hot take, a science teacher. Because if she really likes working with kids, that doesn't mean she needs to throw away her education in biology entirely.
Yeah, I wanted to point out 2 things that I see in this letter. Mm-hmm. One of them is all I ever wanted to do was science. That is such a strong statement.
And it warms the cockles of my cold, dead heart. Like, you always hear people being like, all I ever wanted to do was play professional baseball or be a singer. And she's like, she just wants to do science. How fucking wholesome is that?
I think that's beautiful. And honestly, I think there are so few women in STEM that I would be remiss if I didn't urge you to, like, don't throw away that love that you have for science easily. It doesn't mean that you have to resume this particular coursework in this particular field at this particular college at this particular time in your life. But, find some way, please, to bring that love of science in to your life, just because there are so few women who can look up to other women in the field. Mm-hmm. And also, like, you love it. Like, this is the strongest statement of love that you make in your letter. Mm-hmm. All you ever wanted to do is science. That's really beautiful.
It is really beautiful. And also, we're kind of living at an era in which science is not as appreciated as it perhaps should be. So I'm going to go ahead and encourage everyone who has ever had an interest in science to maybe explore that interest.
Yeah, do it. Can I go way off the beaten path here?
You may. I grant you permission.
I'm really gonna psychoanalyze this. Majoring in biology, like, biology to me is like, wow. Like, if someone told me they're a biologist, I would be like, holy shit, I'm talking to someone way smarter than I am. And the other things that Julia mentions, having an interest in or an experience in: retail, food service, daycare centers. And she also mentioned that she was working really hard to maintain C averages. I wonder to what extent the internal critic is being allowed to kick you while you're down.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good point.
It can feel like I have overstepped my skill. I have reached too high in wanting to study this thing that really interested me. I should back off, know my place, and work in something that aligns with people's expectations of me. I could be completely off base on that, but that kind of like pricked my ears up, thinking that maybe the coursework is really difficult and that you are struggling with what you want to do next. and that you're wanting to move to something that feels safe, something that doesn't feel like you're challenging yourself. Not to say that those jobs aren't challenging, because they are all really challenging.
And I'm kind of reading into your answer a little bit, but like there's the heteronormative stereotype that like childcare is an acceptable career direction and a safe career direction for women, whereas science, that's the boys' club right there. All of which is not true. In fact, I do want to make a shout out to the male nurturers and the women scholars out there, because what you do is important and representation matters across all fields.
Yes. And there's such a difference to me between someone who's just a professor or just a teacher or just a coworker, and someone who's truly a mentor to you, someone who can really just like kiki with you, be really real with you. And I feel like finding that kind of person who is in the sciences would be really valuable to you.
Oh, totally.
Someone who could give you some real perspective about like how much is what the coursework I'm working on now, how much does that really align with
absolutely
expectations in the industry?
And that's the kind of conversation you can have with a potential mentor or, like a real scientist that'll tell you not only like hashtag it gets better and the coursework is not indicative of what your day-to-day life as a scientist will be, but who will also be able to maybe help Julia get that direction that she's looking for. She wants to find a direction. That seems to be her biggest issue right now. And talking to professionals in the field, whether it be through informational interviews or internships or, going to a professor's office hours, that's where you'll find out like what your options really are. Because let's face it, neither of us is a scientist. So we don't really know what the career possibilities are there. We don't really know what the part-time jobs or the entry-level jobs are like in the sciences. But a real scientist or one of your professors who are also real scientists, I want to make that clear, will understand that and be able to give Julia that direction. She just needs to have the conversation. She needs to talk to people who potentially have the life that she wants to lead in 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. I think you and I both always felt like we really thrived in an academic environment. I think you and I are similar in that.
Oh, totes. We're huge nerds.
We're such nerds. We're freaking nerds. Like, we test well. We enjoy the sort of logic and the puzzles and the challenges.
I finished assignments weeks in advance. I was that kid.
Oh, it disgusts me.
I know.
I finished them 5 minutes after they were due. Welcome, late in life ADHD diagnosis.
I also feel like you're the reason I got into the habit of sleeping with an eye mask, because you would be pulling all-nighters while I was trying to sleep.
Yes, because it's due the next day, so I need to work until 3:30 in the morning to get it done because I put it off. But like, we really love it. Like we thrived in that environment. Not everyone does.
And that's okay.
That is completely okay. If you've internalized any of that feeling that like, because I have to work this hard just to make C's, that means that there's something wrong about what I want out of life, that's not, that just ain't right at all. You sound like a wonderful person with really cool interests, and I think you should follow those interests. And if you need to step back from college for a while, or take a semester off and do a little bit of nannying or something that will help you just sort of keep afloat, but also regroup mentally.
I want to give you some advice first off if you want to get into childcare, which is that daycare centers are not your only option. I, spoiler alert, was actually a nanny for about 5 years, which is how I paid my way through most of college, not my actual tuition, but my living expenses. And I recommend going on either sittercity.com. They're not paying us, but I'm recommending them anyway, or various other nanny gig finding sites. So I would just say that if you like kids and you think childcare is something you want to do, you can get into it in the gig sector rather than just through daycares or preschools or anything like that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Very actionable.
I know, right?
I really feel like I want all the best for you. And I think a career in what you really feel that you love, a career that probably pays pretty well, a career with a lot of growth. Someone with a degree in science, there's so much that they could do. So I want that more for you than doing the kind of work that has a more limited career path, fewer options,
the safe path,
and less money.
Less money, sure.
Sorry, we don't pay people who do retail and food service and daycare very well at all.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, if you would like to live a life of limited financial means, definitely get into the very, very difficult work of the service industry. Yeah. Hey, are you good with that?
I think I'm good with that.
All right. Listeners, if there's a question you'd like for us to answer, go to bitchesgetriches.com and click Ask the Bitches.
There is only one way to guarantee that we'll answer your question, and that is to become a Patreon donor.
If you like what we do and you do want to keep us going, please become a Patreon donor and support us with whatever donation amount you feel comfortable with.
We also have a merch store where you can buy t-shirts and printable worksheets and more.
Finally, there are some free things you can do to say thanks. Please rate and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, whatever you use. It bumps us up on the charts and makes us easier to find. Follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Pinterest, and subscribe to our articles so you never miss a new one. You can do all of that at bitchesgetriches.com.
Hey, is there anything else that they should know?
I'm under a blanket!
That is good to know. Bitches out!
Bitches out!
So I want to acknowledge that I think... Oh, hold on.
Oh, was that a dog? Do we have a special guest appearance from a dog?
Sunny is having a nightmare or a good dream. I can't tell the difference, but he is twitching and going, wee, wee, wee.
Oh, it's a little baby.
Yeah, I'm gonna... Hey, Sunny. 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 Hi, baby boy. Go back to sleep.